Hi, everybody. Welcome to our PGT Taster session today. It's lovely to have you here with us. My name is Dr. Sophie Ward, and I'm the MA Education Programme Director. I will be stepping down from this role, and the new director, Louise Gascoigne, is also here with us today. So in this taster session, we're going to talk, you're going to hear from some of the module conveners, talking a little bit and sharing with you some of the module content that you will have in your time at Durham. As you know, we have a number of programs. So are you here for MA Education? Or it could be for ICE, or for MA Education Leadership and Change, or MA Research Methods Education. So these are the programs we offer. And on each strand, there are some options that you can choose from, and you're going to be hearing a little bit from some of the conveners of those modules. Cora, please, could you go to the next slide? First of all, you hear from Dr. Dimitra Kokotsaki, and then from Professor Nadia Siddiqui, then Professor Stephen Gorard, and then at the end, we'll have time for question and answer session. So if we begin with Dimitra.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. Can you hear me all right? Yeah, okay, wonderful. Okay, so I'm very happy to share with you today some information about our mini module on interviews. So as part of this module, we will be discussing the use and purposes of the qualitative interview as a methodological and research tool in social science. Next slide, please, Cora. So this module is delivered via a workshop style teaching and learning kind of teaching kind of delivery. So it is delivered via a series of 5 2-hour workshops that you will attend weekly. So it's a 10 hours attendance in total. And with each workshop, there is some preparation for you to do. So preparation before and some work to do after. So some pre-workshop tasks and some post-workshop tasks. And of course, there will also be readings and tasks assigned following each workshop. And in this module, we seek to foster a supportive space in which you can collaborate in your learning. So workshop sessions will be interactive. They will rely a lot on you having completed the assigned preparation, reading, and tasks before the session, and engaging with the post-workshop tasks as well. So it's a lot, it has got to do a lot with collaboration, not just us delivering the information to you, but you working individually and together in groups to learn from one another. So it's instructor facilitated and student-led in many ways. So you will be leading the content and our tasks in many ways. So you will learn individually, of course, but there will be also a lot of opportunities, I said, to collaborate, to learn from one another, to engage in group, in peer learning. So we'll have a lot of discussions. We will be showcasing our ideas, our research. We will asking questions. We will all attempt to answer those questions. So it will be a lot of collaboration taking place. And then as part of these workshops, you will be collecting evidence in relation to interviews as a method, as a research tool, in terms of building up the portfolio that you will be assessed on at the end. Next slide, please, Cora. Thank you. So as I said before, there are 5 workshops, 2-hour workshops. Each one is a 2-hour workshop. So we will be talking about interviews. What are interviews? Why might a researcher conduct interviews? We will talk about the different types, different purposes of interviews. How are we asking research questions? What types of research questions are conducive to perhaps then engage in interviewing as a research method? How are we recruiting our participants? How are we developing the interview schedule that is going to form part of the interview, to be the base, rather, of the interview? Ethics and positionality, researcher positionality in interviews and interviewing, very, very important topics that we will spend quite a lot of time thinking about. how might we want to analyze our data? What types of analysis are there and why we might choose a particular one of them? So we will talk a lot, we'll bring a lot of examples about types of analysis and practical examples, workable examples to think about and to have as a basis for your analysis. And we will talk about computer-assisted and creative ways to collect, analyze, and present the data, which is always a very interesting topic to think about. How can we creatively present the data in an engaging, appealing way, but is also authentic and really represents the data that we have collected. Next one, Cara, please. So just here to give you, it hasn't come up very well here. It doesn't matter. I think you will get what I'm trying to say here. So just to give you some food for thought about an interview, what it might be. So at its simplest level, an interview, a research interview, is a dialogue between interviewer and interviewee. Researchers explore in detail the experiences, the motives, the opinions of others, and learn to see the world from perspectives other than their own, as Rubin and Rubin put it. By putting together descriptions from separate interviewees, researchers create portraits of complicated processes. So this is what I would like you to remember, complicated. It doesn't mean that because we're interviewing and we're pulling together information, it's a simple and straightforward process, but it can be complex, it's complicated. So we are portraying complicated processes. So this is where our analysis has to be systematic, has to be rigorous, has to be justifiable in order to reach those conclusions at the end. So interviews provide in-depth information pertaining to participants' experiences and viewpoints on a particular topic. So it's in-depth information. I would like you to remember in-depth, complex, participants' own worldview. So interviews can be one-to-one, it can be conducted in groups. It's what we say focused group interviews, and they are very much, they're very frequent in this type of research in social sciences. Next slide, please, Cora. And I would also like you to remember the word interpretation. Interpretation is at the heart of the interview-based research method. So we interpret, we collect information, we analyze it, and we interpret in order to reach the findings at the end. So interpretative researchers hold that the best way to learn about people's meanings and meaning making is to listen to people talk about their experiences in their own way, in their own words. And so people's own words afford the best access a researcher can have to how they understand their experiences. So interviews can yield full and rich accounts of how people see the world, what sense they make of it, and perhaps what concerns they bring to their lives in relation to the topic of interest. Next slide, please, Cora. I would also like you to remember, and it is important to remember here, that a researcher doesn't start with, okay, I'm going to conduct interviews. This is not how it works. I would really like to work with interviews, because what is important to remember is that the use of a particular method should be derived from the research topic, from the research questions to which an answer is sought, and the theoretical framework within which the researcher is working. So we move from research concern and topic to the research questions, and then to appropriate method or methods via their underpinning philosophical stance and theoretical approach to understanding the social world. So then we construct their methodology. So we don't start from interviews, we start from the problem, the issue we want to investigate. And perhaps interviews might be or not the best method to use to understand that issue. Next slide, please. And just to really finish here by giving you a flavor of what the assessment is going to be like. So it's a reflective portfolio, a 2,000-word reflective portfolio. And this portfolio assessment is based on a collection of work that will be captured from each of the 5 workshops that represents your progress towards the summative assessment task. So it's an ongoing, really, work rather than coming up with an essay at the end, a summative piece of work. So this summative assessment task is a research design task where you will choose a topic or area of focus in education that you're interested in exploring, and where interviews would be an appropriate method of data collection, since we're talking about interviews in this module. And then you will be using the preparation and in-workshop task associated with each workshop to then develop a portfolio of different artifacts that show how you have developed a plan to collect some data using interviews as the research method. And here artifacts might look like a draft interview schedule. So there will all be short written pieces, a draft interview schedule, reflective pieces of writing, examples of work you have presented, perhaps, and explored in the workshops. And of course, suitable portfolio artifacts will be signposted by us in each workshop session. So subject-specific skills you will develop as part of this, and you will have an understanding of how to conduct interviews, why we may want to conduct interviews, how to analyze interviews. You will develop a critical understanding of current debates around interviews as an approach within educational research, and a critical understanding of a range of approaches related to the conceptualization, application, and analysis of interviews within educational research. Thank you so much for listening. I'm here, of course, for any questions that I'm sure you will have at the end. Thank you. Oh, is it now? Yeah, so if anyone has any questions that I can answer in relation to this module, I'm very happy to.
You can either ask your question or use the chat function. Have you found the chat function? It's at the bottom of the toolbar. If you click on chat, you'll be able to post any questions you might have for Dimitra. Okay, so next we have Nadia talking about her module.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much, Sophie and Dimitra, for giving me this chance to talk about my teaching. Usually I'm being asked to talk about my research, but here I am talking about what I teach in the department for my MA students. And basically my teaching is research-led, and I will explain that to you in the next few slides. Here are the names of 4 modules that I have been teaching since last 4 years. Some of them are new. I have developed them based on the need of the department, and some are given to me as the legacy modules, and my role, and I'm now the lead of the modules. I have made substantial changes, modernized them, brought in new content and research in it, but I love to say that they are legacy modules, and I would like that legacy to be continued. So education policy and evaluation is one such module. I teach with Professor Stephen Gorard, and we have really enjoyed delivering lectures and seminars with our PhD researchers in this education policy and evaluation module. It's a 30 credit module, which is basically lectures and seminars, combination of workshops as well. Quite heavy module with a lot of work to be done in the form of oral presentations, in the form of homework, coming on discussion board, commenting on the cases that we put on the discussion board for you to comment on. So basically, you get to know what education policies have been introduced in different country contexts. Mainly, we are talking about UK, but slowly and gradually we have integrated a content from developing countries, from China, from other countries. So we try to make it international as much as possible. And we talk about evaluation. We talk about evidence that has emerged from ongoing research, our own research, and what is the quality of research in that domain. So the second module is more focused on the design and methods aspect, but very interesting module with a lot of interest from students to know what is an experiment in education. Usually the term is famous for doing work in sciences, but experiments can be done in education. We have led experiments and we have designed, we are continuing education, experiments in education at the current moment as well. So this specific module is basically for research methods, and this year we will be opening it for our other MA students as well. You are most welcome to come and join us here. It is interesting. We talk about history of education in experiments. We talk about the problems of causation and what is causal design in education, what kind of data is required for experiments, how we make experiment rigorous and robust studies, and where in the research cycle this specific design is embedded. So usually known as the gold standard research design or research methods, and what is the critique about this gold standard practice or gold standard design in education. So we talk about it, we sell this, but at the same time, we critique this design. So the other module that I have done for the second year is, for the second time in the last, in the current academic year, is secondary data in education research. Data is everywhere in education. Data talks about, we have administrative data, we have research collected data, we have administrative data, like in England, we have National Pupil Database that we have access to. And we talk about data that emerges from surveys and interviews, large-scale studies, longitudinal studies, and how we can use it to inform education policy and education practice. This is a workshop style module, and we do a lot of workshop work activities based on real actual data, as in assessment data or interview data, and we see it's been collected already and how we can use already collected data for education. Systematic reviews is another module in which I collaborate with my colleague, Dr. Johnny Daniel, and it's basically synthesizing research conducted and in the form of published papers, reports, media news, and how we can synthesize this research to inform education practice and policy. Interesting set of modules, all open for you. And if you can't take because you have other workload, we open them for audit as well. Next slide, please. And the kind of teaching I do here is, the first picture is the team for education policy. This is one of our class, and we have it's very interactive research-led teaching. You can see I'm here talking about our latest research findings that we have collected or we have published recently or we are working on. So this basically is, we cover theoretical part of a policy and discourse about policy, but basically we bring in real research in the classroom. We talk a lot about judging the quality of research, and we bring in very strong, rigorous methodologies in classroom, asking students to critique research. Never be afraid of saying this is a rubbish study, that data is poor quality, that there is no design in the study, there are no research questions in the study. So we take that hesitation out of students and say, judge the studies. We talk a lot about developing research designs in these 4 modules. Depending on what your research question is, what is the most suitable and feasible research designs that students can think of. And we talk about models for evaluation, especially in evaluation of policy module. So you can see in the picture, students are brainstorming, collecting points by discussion and group work, how we can make evaluation models, how we can create comparison groups, how we can draw on an existing data, what kind of analysis we can conduct given the limitations of data set, given the strength of the data sets, and what could be the best evaluation design for a specific program or a policy. Analysis of data. So we have a lot of exposure for students to actually analyze data in their homework practice, in their seminar practice, and they are given access to Excel files, software, SPSS to analyze different small set data set. We start from simple and then we move towards complex. So first time there is this comment is, oh, I can't do it. This is not possible. I've never worked on numbers. Numbers are not my area. I can't deal with numerical data. And then we have to discuss a lot. No, it's not only numbers. These are converted into numbers. These are not numbers. And then slowly and gradually we can see that how students come out of that hesitation and fear of working with numerical data. Next slide, please. These are the comments from my students, and they say it is engaging. They say it is full of practice. It is a lot of exposure in critiquing existing literature. We talk about international policies, and they say that personal experiences, whatever we discuss, it is relevant with their own home countries. It is linked with the education landscape where they are coming from. So I like when students can make that connection in their learning and in their thinking while we are giving lectures and delivering seminars. So I think understanding policies, understanding its aims, and actually knowing what those policies are doing for children, for stakeholders, and what will be the long-term impact is what we cover in policy. But actually all these things are discussed in other modules that I've talked about. So next slide, please. And this is general comments, engaging atmosphere, solid foundation in data analysis. They talk about using SPSS and Excel. They talk about us as how we support the learning process throughout their MA journey. And there is a lot of interaction in the classroom level and out of classroom. So you'll see in the next picture, next slide, please. So you will see these are interactive sessions, and these are books, edited book series, which contains chapters from our MA students. They published in our book based on their dissertation. So those students who work with me, Stephen and Bhagwat, they do marvelous research. They get a lot of support from us, and we encourage publishing. We provide them a lot of support to work with us and interact with us formally and informally. Some of them are in, this is Stephen's old office, and they are in my home. The second and third picture is my living area, and a very, very healthy atmosphere, very relaxed and very, very informal. And we engage in a number of ways. And then the first picture is students presenting their posters based on their group work. So this is how I teach. This is my teaching style. And you're most welcome to attend the modules in which I contribute with other colleagues, especially Stephen. So over to you, Stephen, now.
Hello, can we stop sharing screen, please? Thank you. Hi, I can't see many of the participants, so it's a bit like speaking into the emptiness of a void. My name's Stephen, or Stephen Gorrard. I'm the director of the Evidence Centre here, but perhaps more relevant to today, I lead the module called Design and Methods in Educational Research, or DEMA for short. Now, this is a core module, so everybody undertaking the masters of whichever kind will be pursuing this module, because it basically teaches you several things. It helps you to understand how to read research. So the module comes very early on, because you're going to be starting doing other modules, learning substantive things, and you'll be reading research. And for some of you, that might be a difficult thing, a challenge to start with. So what this module will do is to help you to read and understand, and then be appropriately critical of that research, to try and judge how good is the research, How much should I trust or believe the findings or the results or the implications? In addition, it'll help you with your thesis. As part of the master's, you have to do a dissertation. That's a little bit, a small study, independent piece of research. So the DEMA module will also help you in terms of preparing for the dissertation. So much so that the assignment is really just a proposal for the dissertation. So based on what you learn in the module, you write a proposal for your thesis, and then that can be the basis of your thesis. So we're trying not to waste your time or to duplicate your efforts and so on. And I think perhaps more importantly, learning about what research is and how it should be and how to judge its quality will help you in your future life. I think it's an important thing because it helps you to judge the trustworthiness or believableness, like, of material that you read. And that might help you in a range of ways. And one of the ways that we could discuss, if you wanted, at the end, would be if you wanted to continue at Durham or somewhere else to do a doctorate in education, a PhD normally, where you're doing a larger piece of independent research, like your MA thesis, but bigger and bolder and 3 times as long. Okay, so what is the module? The module is probably unlike what you may have learned before. So even those of you who've done some research methods training previously, the module will still have lots that you won't have heard of or you won't have thought about, because the emphasis, at least at the start, is on the study design or the research design, because that's fundamental to the quality of any piece of research. Yes, we'll cover data collection, we'll have seminars and workshops on collecting and analyzing different kinds of data. But actually, that's the easy part of research. The interesting and challenging part is to make sure that the research itself, the design of the research, is such that it can address the research questions you've got. And I thought I would just illustrate this with a silly example, but bear with me. You have to think about this as we go along. So imagine you come across a new way of teaching English. You might be teaching English as a second language or a foreign language, or might be teaching English in English. Well, it's a new way of teaching English. If you don't like English, think of maths or physics or art, whatever it was going to be. But it's a new way of teaching English that someone's proposed. It sounds promising, it sounds interesting, but you want to know if it works. So will it actually produce better results for students than using the way you're using now or that somebody else is using now? So you have a research question. How do you find out if this new method of teaching English works? So I'm going to suggest a few approaches. Let's start with, you could ask a few students who've been using this approach. So somebody's taught these students using this new approach to teaching English, and you ask a few students, well, how was it? Did you like it? Did you learn a lot? And it's a genuine question to you all. You don't have to answer it, but think of an answer. Are you happy with that? Is that a good way of deciding whether this method of teaching works? So imagine all the people who responded were positive. They liked it. We enjoyed the sessions. It was fun. We felt we learned a lot. Is that a test of whether the method works? It could be part of the method. It could be part of how you design a study to do it. But surely that's not the answer. Whether people enjoy it or whether students think they're learning through it is not actually whether they do learn better or learn most. That approach would be basically like doing journalism or maybe doing some kind of feasibility study. Okay, let's imagine now, instead of doing it with a few students, you ask a lot of students who've used this approach. What do you think of it? Well, that might be better, but it's still problematic. You've still got all sorts of bias. Why were these people chosen to be doing this study, to be doing this approach of teaching English? Are they being asked by their teachers? So they're being, in English we'd say sucking up to the teacher, being kind to the teacher or not. Why wouldn't you look at their test scores? So imagine another study came along, and instead of just asking students, it also looked at the test scores that they had maybe at the beginning and the end of a term, or the beginning and the end of a year. So you test, someone's tested the children or the students at school. This happens a lot. You've got a score. At the end of the term, they're tested again, and they've made an improvement. So is that now a good piece of research to show that this thing works? We do something over a term. At the end of the term, the children score higher than at the beginning of the term. Genuine question. Is that a good approach? What's wrong with it? Well, what's obviously wrong with it is that children could get better anyway. It could be nothing to do with the way in which you teach English, or even teaching English at all. Children tend to learn more literacy, numeracy. They get better at things just with age and experience. It could be nothing to do with the teaching or the approach to teaching. So what could you do? You could compare the progress made by the students taught in this way with another group in another school or other schools who were not using this approach, and then perhaps discover, the students who had this new approach to teaching English had more progress than the group who didn't. So that's better. The problem with that is that there are reasons why some schools might be using this new approach and some not. The students might be different, they might have different abilities, they might have made different progress anyway. So it's still not convincing. It's better, we're getting better all of the time, but it's still not convincing. So what about if you took all the schools or classes and teachers who were willing to try the new approach, you've got a large number of those, and you randomly say, okay, half of you use the new approach and half of you don't use the approach. Now you've got a better comparison because they're all volunteers. There's a large number. The randomization should mean that you've got relatively similar groups using a new approach or not using a new approach. And you can begin to draw comparisons between the two groups to see whether is there evidence of promise that this new approach to teaching English is indeed better. But then you've got a question of, well, is it ethical? I mean, supposing it is a better approach, we've said to half of the people who wanted to use the approach that they can't use it because they're being the comparison group, and only half who wanted to use it can use this approach. That doesn't seem fair or reasonable or even feasible. But then you could introduce the idea of a waiting list. So what you're saying is, let's say you're only doing it for a term. You say, well, everyone's going to use this approach. It's just for this term, the first group will do it. And in the second term, the other group will do it. So after 2 terms, everybody has tried out the new approach. But at the end of the first term, you can compare the progress to see whether the first group has done better than the second group. Does that make sense? Now, I could go on, but we're limited in time. The point I'm trying to make is the fight against bias and sloppiness in research never stops. I could keep going on adding things to the research. But the things I'm talking about, having a comparison group, randomizing, trying to compare scores, worrying about the ethics, these are all elements of research design or study design. And they're the elements that we use to help judge to what extent a piece of research does or doesn't address the research question in a way in which we can trust the findings, believe the findings. So we're always looking for where it's gone wrong, not because we're particularly critical, but because that's the way to try and find the problems and then cure them in a piece of research. And that's the emphasis of this module, to help you both to conduct research which other people can't really criticize very well because you've found good results, but also to help you to make judgments about other people's research that you're going to read in your modules or for the rest of your life. Right. What I would propose is that actually all the things I suggested doing, you do all of those. Now, these are not alternatives, they're all things you're building towards. But what the module should produce, I hope, is an improvement in your ability to do decent research and to be suitably critical of the research conducted by others. and I'm suggesting that's good for this module, the DAMA module. It's good for all your other modules because it'll enable you to look at the evidence that's being presented in those modules. It's good for your thesis, and it's good for your life, and that might include perhaps doing more research, either immediately or later in your career. I'm going to end by showing you 3 books. You don't have to read all of them cover to cover, but these are all books on the reading list. If you could, if you could read one or more of them before you start the module, it will help you to pick up the ideas quickly. I'm just going to flash them on the screen. The first one, these are all on the reading list. It's simply called Research Design. The second one is called The Trials of Evidence-Based Education. And the third one is called How to Make Sense of Statistics. Those of you who've never done statistics before, who think, oh dear, no, they're numbers, as Nadia was talking about, don't worry, this is a very, very simple book. Statistics is actually a very simple thing to do, but the people who teach it and the people who write about it normally make it sound much more complicated than it needs to be. It's actually quite a simple thing to do. And you all have the skills both to use numbers and to do research, because you use those skills in your everyday life. And that's another thing that the module will try and stress, that we're not teaching you new things. Yes, there are craft tips, but basically you already have the appropriate judgment to make about research. The question is, are you applying them in your studies in the way you would in your real life if someone was trying to sell you a house or persuade you to stay in a particular hotel or whatever? Okay, I'm happy to take questions and comments on that, but that's me done. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. And thank you to Dimitra, Nadia and Stephen for talking about their modules. And I'd just like to thank everybody for coming today and thank our speakers. And if you do find that you do have some questions later on, please don't hesitate to contact us directly or to contact us at the School of Education. And we're always happy to respond to any questions. And great advice there from Stephen about getting hold of the reading lists so that you can take this time in the summer to prepare for your studies. And we look forward to seeing you in September.